Super Rugby Pacific getting underway tomorrow, folks. It is not long to go. We're going to go through the games that are being played this weekend, some key guys from the lineups, some predictions, and you guys can let me know your thoughts on how the games are going to go. It's probably your last chance to sign up for the Super Brew pool if you want to do your predictions game down in the description. I'm doing pretty well. I'm going to predictions this year. Six Nations, I'm cracking it. Premiership, I'm doing really well, but Super Rugby is definitely a different kettle of fish. We'll see how things go with that one. Now, this competition is the inaugural version of Super Rugby Pacific. Remember, Super Rugby, the old one, is dead and buried. We've had Super Rugby Aotearoa, we've had Super Rugby AU, we've had Super Rugby Trans-Tasman in the interim during the pandemic, and now this is supposed to be the new competition going forward. So the Aussie teams, Kiwi teams from Super Rugby former, with two new teams, the Fijian DRUA and the Moana Pacifica side. So one of them based in Australia for the moment, the DRUA, and Moana Pacifica based in New Zealand. It's a rocky start to the competition, you have to say. You've got COVID cases in the Moana Pacifica camp, so that game has been postponed, which is not an ideal way to get your season underway. You've got the New Zealand teams all playing down in a bubble down in Queenstown, no crowds, which is again is a spectacle. Not the ideal way to start the season, but I mean, what can you do? It's still an ongoing pandemic, so fingers crossed by the end of the season we'll have Trans-Tasman matches, because at the moment it's the Aussie teams playing the Aussie teams and the Kiwi teams playing the Kiwi teams, plus with the new teams, one in each conference. So it's not the ideal start. Remember, free travel between Australia and New Zealand without quarantine does not exist at the moment. So not ideal, but we will see how things crack on. But as I said, we'll get going a few words on each game, and you guys can let me know your thoughts. The first one, the Tahs and the DRUA. So it's the historic first game for the DRUA. Wishing them all the best, absolutely. I'm pretty sure every neutral will be in favour of the DRUA, because the Tahs tend to be not the most popular Aussie team with Aussie fans, even though I'm representing the Tahs kit today. The Tahs are without Michael Hooper. Remember, he's back from Japan, but he's still recovering from a foot injury, so he's not available. But they do have a bunch of kind of Wallabies in their squad. Jake Gordon's captain. He's at 9. They've got Angus, who's been kind of cracking on for the Wallabies in 2021. They've got Izaia Perese, who had a bit of a breakout year. So they've got a team mostly of familiar names from last year, a few Wallabies guys, and a few new guys as well. One of the wingers, one of the Lucy's, or his locks, new guys like Geoff Cridge and Dylan Pietsch. I'll learn her pronunciation of his name tomorrow, I guess. But yeah, I mean, at home, I think the Waratahs are going to be pretty big-time favourites, but I'll get to that in a second. The DRUA is an interesting one. I mean, you got Baden Kerr starting at 10, former Blues guy. He's played for Counties Manukau in the Mitre 10, which is a competition I wish I watched more of right now, with all the guys coming through in the New Zealand sides anyway, a few in the DRUA as well. But he's a bit of a journeyman at this point in his career, early 30s. Wish him all the best, but I do kind of hope Fiji or the DRUA get a local product through at 10 at some point, because it tends to be 10 is the hardest position for Tier 2 teams to fill. A lot of the Tier 2 teams get guys from overseas who are obviously still eligible for that country to play for them at 10, just because it seems to be the hardest position to train for whatever reason. I guess because they are just running the show. Like Vola Vola plays 10 for Fiji for the most part. I think he was raised in Australia. Like the Americans tend to have Irish-born 10 play for them in recent times. I mean, there's some countries that are exceptions, of course, but it just tends to be a theme. So fingers crossed Kerr has a good game, but long term that we can get a Fijian guy running the show at 10. You've got Ngutha, who's there as captain. He's in the loose forwards. You've got a couple of veterans in Dolakoto and Solo. Loads of Fijian caps on the bench. Actually, they're not starting. They're kind of going with some of the younger guys. You've got some Mitre 10 Cup guys, but I mean, largely for mine, it's a relatively unknown Fiji squad. That's just on me for not knowing a bunch of these guys. Some of them are local products, some of them are Mitre 10, as I mentioned, but I am very, very keen to see these guys get going. Like in pre-season, the Waratahs certainly look better than last year. Got a win over the, was it the Reds in their pre-season? No, the Brumbies. And the DRUA beat the Rebels. So, yeah, we'll kind of have to wait and see, but there's still a lot of unknowns about this one, especially with the DRUA having a bunch of guys who are making their Super Rugby debuts. That being said, predictions-wise, the bookies have got the Waratahs by 9, whereas the Rugby Forecast algorithm, which requires recent results to formulate its predictions, has got the DRUA by 8. I guess partly because the Waratahs were terrible last year. So, new coach Darren Coleman will be looking to revitalise the squad. Also, if you're looking for a former Welsh international, they've got Jamie Roberts on the bench, so that's going to be a bit of fun. Remember, he was in South Africa last year, the year before, playing Super Rugby pre-pandemic. So, yeah, welcome back to Super Rugby for him. The next game, the Chiefs and the Highlanders, I reckon that looks like maybe the match of the round. You've got a bunch of All Blacks. I mean, look at the Chiefs' back row of Luke Jacobson, Sam Cane, and Peter Gasawakula. That's pretty tidy. You've got Josh Ioane, who's getting his first start for the Chiefs at 10. Remember, he's moved up from the Highlanders. First game from him to play his former team. Tupaia Nankivell is a pretty impressive midfield. You've got Tokiaho, the All Blacks hooker, on the bench. Ta'avao as well, Atumoli, Brad Weber, who's co-captain, all on the bench. So this Chiefs side is looking pretty stacked. In preseason, I think they pretty much went undefeated. Although preseason doesn't count for a heck of a lot based on how my Blues in previous years did well in preseason and did nothing in the season itself. The Highlanders, they've also got some All Blacks floating there. You got the likes of Ethan de Groot, Liam Coltman, Shannon Frizzell. You got James Lynch's, Gareth Evans, Aaron Smith, like Mitch Hunt, who kind of put Josh Ioane out of a job at 10 for the Highlanders. So, yeah, man, on paper, I reckon this one looks like an absolutely very, very fascinating game. It's going to suck that there's no crowd there, but yeah, on paper, that one honestly looks like a really, really interesting match. The Highlanders, I think, did beat the Crusaders preseason, so they weren't exactly slouches either. So yeah, two sides who could be pretty interesting to watch. The Chiefs are the favourites with the bookies, and the Highlanders are the favourites with the algorithm. So bookies by 4 for the Chiefs and algorithm by 1 for the Highlanders. Remember, the Chiefs, they were under Gatland for a while. They weren't doing the best. They had a bit of a revitalisation last year. And remember, Gats has gone on to the director of rugby role. So hopefully we can get a bit of continuity for the Chiefs. I reckon they're the favourites. I'll be picking them without a doubt. The next one, the Crusaders and the Hurricanes. Remember, the Chiefs and Highlanders one's kind of early afternoon, 4:35. Crusaders, Hurricanes is kind of more of your normal evening game, just after 7 o'clock local time here in NZ. The debut of Pablo Matera for the Crusaders will be maybe one of the bigger talking points. And if you're looking at sides which are pretty stacked, the Crusaders one is probably it. I mean, you got Joe Moody, Scott Barrett, Sam Whitelock, along with Pablo Matera, all starting. You got All Blacks there. You got David Havili, Braden Ennor, George Bridge, Will Jordan. It's an absolutely stacked side. Interestingly, no Richie Mo'unga. He's exercised a clause in his contract to kind of have a wee rest at the start of the season, so he will be doing that. Ethan Blackadder's out with a hamstring injury. Josh Goodhue's still not fit. So there's still more guys to come back as well, which is a bit scary for the Crusaders. Be good to see Lester Fainganuku back in action. He's on the wing this week. But in the absence of Mo'unga, Fergus Burke has got the reins at 10, so we'll see how he can boss the side around. For the Canes, they are not exactly got a slouch lineup either. It's one of the refreshing things about seeing the, as a Kiwi, to see these New Zealand Super Rugby teams back. You've got a team with the likes of Almua, Lomax. I mean, Lomax I like to give a bit of stick, but we'll see how he goes in this one. He's an All Black, like it or not. Karifi's there at 7. Savier's there at 8. He's captain for the season as well. Jamie Booth's back. We haven't seen him play for a while. I think he was out long-term injured for quite some time. And interestingly, Ruben Love, the young man, I'm not sure how old he is, but he's still in his early 20s, going to get the 10 jersey. Jackson Garden-Bishop can only manage a bench spot. Wes Husson is there. Julian Savia is on the other wing. Geordie Barrett's there at fullback. So again, a bunch of All Blacks on display. But the Crusaders are the favourites for this. Remember, there's no TJ Perenara. He is out for the start of the season with an injury, which is kind of unfortunate. Crusaders 9-point favourites with the bookies and 6-point favourites with the algorithm. So, yeah, I think the Hurricanes, though, did beat the Crusaders in the preseason 27-24, and that was in Christchurch. So, The Hurricanes are kind of being written off, but we'll see if it actually pans out that way. The final Saturday game is the Reds and the Rebels, which is on like 9:45 New Zealand time, 7:45 local time, East Coast of Australia. Reds and Rebels. The Rebels, a little bit concerningly, I think only played one preseason game. I could be wrong, but they lost to the DRUA, which is maybe it just speaks to the depth of the DRUA guys have got. But you would have thought the established team's going to get it done. But I mean, as I said, it's preseason, so doesn't count for nothing. Just doesn't look that good on paper anyway. The Reds, certainly big expectations with them. They've been the side to beat in Aussie rugby in the last kind of 12 months, and they've got a bunch of Wallabies. You got Tane Tupo there, you got Lalakai Loto, you got Liam Wright, who's captain, you got Harry Wilson, who's looking to kind of prove a point after not playing with the Wallabies at the end of last year. Tate McDermott is captain for this one, interestingly, alongside Liam Wright, co-captains, and James O'Connor's there at 10. A bunch of guys who are on the fringe of the Wallabies as well, like Jock Campbell's there at fullback, Josh Fluke's in the midfield with Hamish Stewart. So yeah, Hunter Paisami's on the bench for this one. You would have thought at home the Reds with that lineup should be big time favourites. The Rebels also without Andrew Callaway, who's got a niggling injury. He was in cracking form last year. I do like the Rebels front row of Or Ugalese and Elof. Cobus Elof is just like he's proper fun to watch. Like him in open play. Maybe up against Tane Alatupo could be worth the price of admission in itself. Matt Phillip, Ross Hale, Petty are the second row. Michael Wells, one of my kind of favourite hard-working grit and determination players at number 8. Joe Powell and Carter Gordon, the 9-10 combo. Matt Tamua's back. We haven't seen him play since his injury last year. He's at 12. Reece Hodge likewise missed the end of the Wallabies end of season tour with injury, so he's at fullback. It's one where the Rebels certainly go as underdogs. 10 points with both the rugby forecast algorithm and the bookies. So yeah, the Rebels apparently facing a bit of an uphill battle. I remember the Rebels lost that game to the DRUA, as I mentioned. The Reds did lose to the Force preseason, but they beat the Tahs. So yeah, for what that's worth. The last one is a Sunday game, the Brumbies and the Force. Remember, the Force are going to be one of the teams, kind of like the New Zealand teams at the moment, who are playing in a home away from home. They're not going to be able to play games in Western Australia, I'm assuming, for the season, but we'll kind of have to wait and see how the COVID situation pans out there. This one's Sunday, 2 o'clock East Coast of Australia, so it's a pretty early game for you guys out west, and it's a 4 p.m. one for us here in NZ. I haven't seen that much talking up the Brumbies, but I do like their lineup. I mean, Slipper, Fainga, and Alatoa, that's an all Wallaby front row. Rob Valtini's there at 6, Pete Sambu's there at 8. So yeah, you got a few Wallabies there in your 4-pack. Ires Simone is a guy who would look to impress after kind of falling down the pecking order at Australia level last year. Tom Banks is there at fullback. Another one who we saw kind of injured towards the end of last year. Jesse Mogg is back. Haven't seen him play in Brumbies colours for an age. He's been over in France playing for a long time. So welcome back to the big boot that is Jesse Mogg. For the Force, the return of Fergus Lee Warner. I haven't seen him play for ages. He's like my favourite player in Australia that just does not get selected for the Wallabies, not even in like wider training camps. I don't understand it. It may be because he's kind of an awkward build between a lock and a Lucy. He is playing lock in this game and he can play both, but the dude just gets through miles of work. And if you guys know me, you know my favourite players are often guys like that. Robertson, Kaitu, and Medrano is the front row. So that's an all-international front row. An Argentinian international with Medrano there at tight head. Kane Kateka and Tim Anstey alongside Brent Stander in the back row. It's pretty tidy. Pryor and Pasitoa are the 9-10 combo, interestingly. The 10 jersey is going to be an interesting one this year. They've got Bailey Kunzel, who was an off-season acquisition from the Brumbies. He's there in the midfield. Manasa Mataele, who was acquired from the Crusaders. He's on the left wing. So they've recruited pretty well. They've got Fines Leawasa on the bench. He's another kind of off-season recruit. So, yeah, interesting times for the Force to see where they're at. The fact they're playing away from home for probably the whole season kind of sucks. But apart from that, I do like their lineup. The Brumbies lost to the Waratahs pre-season. The Force did beat the Reds, and then their DRUA game was cancelled. So Yeah, the Brumbies, though, big-time favourites, 11 points with the bookies and 13 points with the algorithm. So, yeah, 1 on Sunday, 1 on Friday, 3 on the Saturday. If you've got plans for the weekend, you would probably go out and do those. But if you don't have plans, you can stay home and watch the rugby. For you guys who are in Australia, I believe, tickets are on sale for all these games. So, get out there and support your teams. For those of us in NZ, we kind of have to wait and see. And for Blues and Moana Pacifica fans, we just have to wait. So we will see how things go. As I said, Super Report down in the description. Remember, if you guys are in Europe, you need to sign up to that new online streaming service. It's like £50 for the season, so up to you guys if you're going to watch the games. But Sky Sport in New Zealand, Stan in Australia, in Fiji, it's on. The DRUA game, I think, is on FCB. So, yeah, FBC. There you go. Anyway, you guys have any thoughts? Who do you think is going to take out each of these games? Any of the away teams you see getting a result? Because I think for the most part, it is the home teams that are the favourites, even if the New Zealand teams are kind of playing on neutral venues with no crowds. But anyway, you guys have any thoughts? And I'll talk to you soon. See you later.